Differences between the transaction and use tax or the tax override and Bradley Burns is evident mostly when it comes to automobiles. Automobiles are dependent, the transaction and use tax that's generated on automobiles is dependent on where that vehicle is registered. So sales tax gets allocated to the direct point of sale where that dealership is located. If a resident of Port Hueneme buys a vehicle in Oxnard, Oxnard is going to get the 1% Bradley Burns sales tax, and the resident, since the vehicle was registered in Port Hueneme, Port Hueneme will get the district tax, the 1.5, the 1% from the Measure U and the 0.5% from Measure W. Online sales, a little bit easier to explain and follow. The transaction and use tax, it follows the goods to where the goods are delivered, and it doesn't matter where the goods come from. A big assembly bill that was implemented back in 2019, AB 147, at that point in time, there was a requirement for out-of-state retailers to begin to collect and remit those online sales into the pools. And that was the Wayfair decision that went into effect back in October of 2019. This was very instrumental in growing the materiality of the pools on an ongoing basis. Prior to that, pools were not even a blip on the radar screen. There was a second piece of Wayfair, and that was third-party retailers. So those companies like Amazon that collects on behalf of third-party retailers like eBay and Google, at that time began to be required to report and remit those dollars into the pools. So those two pieces grew the pool allocations for all agencies in California significantly. And that really started in the first quarter of 2020, which happened to coincide with COVID. So this was a time period where we had a shutdown in the economy, we had shelter in place, we were required to stay home, and businesses, the brick and mortar retail, general consumer goods types of stores had to shut down. Everyone was home. The patterns of buying online had already begun before COVID, but then when AB 147 came along in 2019, it coincided with a boost to the pools of 30% for all of calendar year 2020. So we had the direct point of sale coming from the Bradley Burns portion. The 1% was dropping in most of the major industry groups, and I'll show you what they are in just a moment. At the same time, this was being offset by growth in the pools. And big part of it, not only being home and shopping from online from our couches, that was one part. The other was AB 147 itself. So when I talk about the major industry groups, this is how we at HDL analyze the data. This is how the data comes in from the CDTFA, the California Department of Tax and Fee Administration. 8 major industry groups: autos and transportation, building and construction, business industry, food, drugs, which has been in the city of Port Hueneme the largest of the 8 major industry groups until the past year or so. And over the past 13 quarters, this has changed, and restaurants and hotels in the city of Port Hueneme are now up at the top. But food and drugs includes business types. We at HDL have created subgroups for all of these 8 major industry groups, and we call them business types. So food and drugs, for example, includes grocery stores and convenience stores, drug stores, and cannabis-related businesses. It's typically the smallest, it is the smallest sector out of 8 groups in the state, but in Port Hueneme, it's been number 1, and now currently it's number 2 largest sector behind restaurants. Restaurants, business types included in that sector include casual dining, sit-down type of restaurants, quick service fast food restaurants, fast casual, which is a hybrid, and you can sit down and order and have waiting service at that type of a restaurant, or you can take it to go, and that's why it's called fast casual. fine dining, leisure and entertainment. All of those are specific business types within restaurants. General consumer goods is a sector that has discount department stores like the Targets and Walmarts and Costco's that are out there, Sam's Club, department stores like Macy's, individual sporting goods stores, shoe stores, the brick and mortar retail, the direct point of sale, the small stores, larger stores that are within each agency and where that place of sale is generated for the Bradley Burns portion. Those are examples of types of businesses within general consumer goods. Fuel and service stations, that includes all gas stations and petroleum type products. Those are the business types that are included in that particular sector. Autos and transportation includes new motor vehicle dealers, used dealers, boats and motorcycles, trailers and RVs. Those are business types that are included in autos and transportation. Building and construction, the largest business type in that sector is building materials. So the Home Depot do-it-yourself type stores are included in that sector. That's the largest business type, building materials within building construction. Business industry is the largest, most varied segment and has 21 business types included, and they can vary from aerospace type companies that are reported within that sector, medical, biotech, agricultural businesses. The largest business type within business industry sector is fulfillment centers. So you hear a lot about Amazon fulfillment centers and others, and there are only a handful of agencies throughout the state that have those fulfillment centers that are actually negotiating the place of sale. So where the Bradley Burns is actually going to that direct jurisdiction. And that makes up, in this quarter that we're analyzing and meeting with cities and agencies now, second quarter 25, it's currently about 28% of the entire sector coming from fulfillment centers. And then the last one, county pool allocation. I've talked about AB 147, the growth of the pools. County pool allocation is dependent upon where that product is delivered. It's primarily coming from out-of-state purchases that are made, use tax dollars that are made, and those purchases that are unidentified will go into that county where that product is delivered. The pools are typically the second or third largest group in almost every agency throughout the state. And like I said, that really didn't happen until AB 147 was implemented. In Port Hueneme, when we look at the Bradley Burns portion, the direct place of sale, state and county pools makes up the fourth largest group out of the 8. So it's definitely a material portion of the budget in Bradley Burns, and pools are not applicable when it comes to the transaction and use tax. So here's in this quarter, I talked about second quarter 25 is the one that we're currently analyzing throughout the state. I actually met with city staff this morning, Port Hueneme, to go over the results of second quarter 25. And we are always comparing like to like quarters. So in this quarter, we're looking at second quarter 25, we're comparing it to second quarter 24. And the reason that I don't have all 8 of the major industry groups listed here is because there are a number of major industry groups that are confidential within the city. And so we group those together. I've highlighted it here: building and construction, business and industry, fuel and service stations. They're all grouped together in that miscellaneous so that we're not breaking any confidentiality laws. And in this quarter, second quarter 25 compared to second quarter 24 is down about 8%. That, when we compare it to the state itself in this quarter, the state was actually up 0.5%. When we compare it to the county was up about 1.2%. And Port Hueneme is getting hit especially hard, and I'll show you a chart in a moment, over the past 13 quarters in food and drugs, and specifically cannabis related businesses. So, and I've been meeting with the city for 6 years, and it has been a difficult ride because cannabis related businesses has been up at the top, and you get very reliant on that being a big portion of the budget. And that's both for Bradley Burns and on the transaction and use tax side. Both of them have been coming down very significantly. That is consistent with the statewide trend. It's not specific to Port Hueneme, but consistently now for the last 2 years, and I'll show you in the next slide, cannabis related businesses, which are one of the business types within food and drugs, they've been dropping significantly. Port Hueneme also has kind of a second hit there in that Ventura County, the majority of agencies within Ventura County are in the cannabis related business. And that's not the case. I meet with agencies throughout Orange County and Los Angeles County, and it's not nearly as predominant in those counties as cannabis is in Ventura County. So when you're in a smaller city that is competing with other bigger agencies around you, jurisdictions that have those cannabis type businesses, you're not only losing out statewide with cannabis coming down significantly, you're losing out because of the competition among all of the different agencies that are right nearby. So that's been a struggle over the years. And when we look at the trends here, measure U, on the left side, these are all of the major industry groups. So you can see the green line up there at the top with general consumer goods. That second green line is food and drugs. And look at that over the past 13 quarters, going back to second quarter 22, food and drugs has gone down very significantly, much more in Port Hueneme because of the big percentage of that sector made up by cannabis related businesses. So this drop here in this sector is almost exclusively attributable to the decline in cannabis revenue throughout the state and in Port Hueneme itself. And so back in second quarter 22, food and drugs was up at the top. And now as we come down in that green line all the way down, food and drugs is middle of the pack. General consumer goods is up here, and restaurants and hotels has grown significantly over that time period as well in terms of the placement, the ranking among the 8. Over here, measure U, you can see the downward trend from second quarter 22 to now over the 13 quarter period. And most of that is attributable to the decline in food and drugs and the decline specifically coming from cannabis related businesses. This is another way of looking at it. These are really the top 5 business types within measure U and the 13 quarter trend. And we can see that now the purple line coming down, and that's specifically cannabis related businesses. The count is 17. That now is going to be a little bit less based on some action taken this week. And that is, so there's less permits at this point in time, but it's come down to the bottom of the pack here. The good news is the city over that period of time has become somewhat less reliant on the cannabis related businesses, but it's still very much a material part of the budget. So it becomes a struggle. It definitely becomes a struggle when you're looking at balancing the budget, and that previously being such a significant portion of the overall revenue and coming down very significantly. But the other groups fairly flat. You can see new motor vehicle dealers as a business type has grown a little bit over that time period, and general merchandise as well. So there is a positive in terms of the diversification, although still quite a bit of reliance on the cannabis related businesses as part of the general fund budget. And here we've updated the budget as of second quarter 25. So 24-25 measure U total dollars ended up at 3,176. 25, 26 is projected to decline almost 1%. And when we compare that to the statewide forecast, our statewide forecast has growth on the Bradley Burn side of about 1%. So you're getting hit a little bit harder. Food and drugs, you can see here coming down another 3.7%, and this has been coming down over the past, we just looked at 13 quarters, and overall about almost 1% decline. We start to see some growth, some normalcy happening. This is the trend statewide. We have 2.5% built into the statewide forecast for 26, 27, and then closer to 2.5 to 3% when we get to those out years, 27, 28, all the way out to 30, 31. So the story over the past 2 fiscal years statewide has been decline. We've seen overall sales and use tax on the Bradley Burn side dropping in fiscal year 23-24, fiscal year 24-25, 25-26 projected, as I said, about 1%, so very flat. It's going to take until really statewide the end of 26-27 until we start to see recovery back to the levels prior to fiscal year 23-24. So we're in a long period of, it was decline and then flattening out and then estimated slow growth moving forward. So just to talk about our forecasting in terms of how we do it, we have a whole team of us. I'm one of the principal consultants. There's actually 11 principal consultants. We're all highly experienced former government fiscal leaders, retired city managers, retired finance directors. Most have worked in city government for most of their career prior to coming to HDL. So we've been in the trenches and we know, we've done budgets, we know how it works on that end. And now I'm fortunate enough to be able to help agencies on this end, and it's really a lot of fun. But we do have, as I said, we have almost 100% of the statewide data. We look at as a team once a quarter, we call it a consensus forecast, and we look at all of the 8 major industry groups. We look at macro levels, what's happening overall at the federal level, at the state level, and then we fine tune that to each individual agency, specifically what's happening in Port Hueneme with the sales tax, with the transaction and use tax, and drill down from there. So we start definitely at the more macro level. We take those factors into account, like tariffs, like Federal Reserve interest rate reduction. We bake that into the overall forecast, and then we look at what's happening in each agency. Once we've done our statewide forecast, then we go out and meet with all of the agencies. And typically for each of us principals, it's about 40 different agencies every quarter that we meet with. And I had Port Hueneme on with me this quarter and last quarter. And so like I said, I met with city staff just today. We do full forecast for individual cities twice a year. So we do that. We don't do one in this quarter, although I did one for the transaction and use tax measure U, because I was going to be meeting with you so that we would be able to provide kind of a benchmark for that as we talk to staff. And then as I meet with your group, typically we do the forecasts in the third quarter data. So it would be next quarter, and then in the fourth quarter with the holiday quarter. And cities at that time in the third quarter are typically working on mid-year budget reviews. And in the fourth quarter, they're typically working on their next year's budget. So that's what coincides with the timing of when we're actually doing the forecasts. And with that ends my presentation. And I'm happy to take any questions that any of you might have.
Questions?
Yeah, this is James Importante.
Hi, Jay.
Thank you, Brett, for the presentation. Familiar with HDL in my previous roles and my current role with the county. And so I'm familiar with HDL since, 2006 or so. And in fact, back then, Lloyd Delamas, the DL and HDL, used to do the updates. And so hopefully he's since retired. But
Yes.
You know, I was wondering, I think I'll start broadly, then maybe go into more specific questions, but I think for staff, what percentage is sales tax out of the entire, I guess, revenue or for the city? So just kind of have that context.
I did not come prepared with that answer, but I can definitely come back with that information.
Okay. Yeah, as I know some of the conversation about, sales tax being, important revenue base, for the city's budget.
It's definitely our largest revenue source.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure how it related to like property taxes.
That would be second.
Right, okay,
It actually used to be reversed, but with Measure U, it switched.
got it, okay. And then, yeah, I think, and when it comes to sales tax, there's two words that, come to mind. It's leakage and capture. And so I think, leakage is where folks, that live in the city go outside of the city's limits to spend their money. And so we don't get the benefit, of their income, of their taxes to go pay for the services that, we enjoy in the city. And then on the capture side, that's the reverse. That's folks outside of the city limits that shop in Port Hueneme. And so, I guess where I'm going with that is, I think it'd be helpful to know, and I don't think it's part of the HDL scope of work, but maybe for staff, to understand kind of where are those opportunities to maybe limit or the leakage. You can't stop it, because there's going to be some businesses that really aren't going to thrive in a small city that maybe need to be elsewhere. And then at the same time, what are those opportunities to capture sales tax? What are some types of businesses that could do well here that aren't here? But folks that live in our city or work in our city would maybe use those services or purchase those goods. And so that's just some comments about, maybe helping improve our sales tax situation moving forward. I don't know if part of the reporting, so along those lines, I don't know if the city uses what they call geocodes in HDL. That's a way you can geographically isolate certain areas of the city to find out, okay, which areas are actually generating this sales tax. Because I think intuitively, in my mind, I know those major corridors, those major intersections like Channel Islands and Victoria, Ventura and Channel Islands, and then, around this area, Pleasant Valley and Ventura. So it'll be interesting to see where in the city some of those sales taxes are being generated. And then, let's see. Yeah, I was amazed to see it was the food and drugs category. I could see where the cannabis-related impacts are, but trying to tie back to the federal shutdown, I don't know if folks understand, some of the impacts to the CalFresh program, SNAP program. Because of the federal shutdown, those benefits may be impacted. So folks' abilities to purchase food items, I know those are untaxed, but, but they're, if they're not able to, I guess, afford food, are they going to be going out to the grocery stores or other outlets where they would otherwise do some other shopping? And so that's kind of, some of my thoughts, maybe we may see impacts from the federal shutdown, maybe in the next quarter or so. So it'll be interesting to see what those reports will look like in the future. So I guess the background on that is that SNAP benefits or CalFresh benefits are directly paid from the U.S. Treasury. They don't flow through the state. So it goes directly to folks' EBT cards. And so my understanding is that there's only funding through November 1st. So once November 1st comes around, those benefits are paused. And, there's 70,000 people in our county that are on CalFresh. And so it's really a concerning situation. So, so those are some of the comments I had. Again, just appreciate the report. Again, I think HDL has been a trusted partner for a lot of agencies, and yeah, looking forward to to the next quarter. Thanks.
Great.
Thank you.
Can I just comment on the leakage analysis? we do have an economic development team that can do that sort of, as you're mentioning, James, leakage analysis for individual agencies. And so they do look at that. They do studies for clients. It's a separate contract. It's not my team, it's the economic development team, but that kind of analysis they're doing throughout the state.
Yeah, I don't know if this is under the purview or scope for the Measure U committee, but one of the thoughts I had, I don't know if we can use, maybe it's not the Measure U funding, but other funds to, I don't know if it's a PSA or some sort of way to encourage folks to shop within the city. You know, I use YouTube quite a bit. That's probably the more predominant form of entertainment, and I know commercials come up a lot, and the one that's been coming up a lot is Dave's Hot Chicken. I cannot go one day without seeing an ad for Dave's Hot Chicken, which is based on my algorithm. I have yet to eat there, but I don't know why it keeps coming. Maybe it's because I haven't eaten there. They know that I haven't eaten there, so they're really targeting my specific address. Maybe it's just me, but I don't know how much those ads cost, but I don't know if there's some way to get the word out to shop in the city that, you know, I think that'd be a good, maybe a worthwhile expenditure, so.
Mr. Plumley, Beth Williams here. Can you go back to the first graph that you showed us? Yeah, that one. I see there's a spike in the, is it the, roads and transportation? Can you speak to what causes some of the spikes, like the autos and transportation in the fourth quarter of '24, and then it drops way back down?
Yeah, and it's because that in autos and transportation, it is, as I mentioned, it's dependent on where the vehicle is registered. So some of these quarters, we've had some big spikes from specific new motor vehicle dealers, and I can't mention individual dealers and individual agencies, but I speculate that the spike is related to the trends in that quarter, because I'm looking at 3 of the past 4 quarters, and the consumer habits, the percentage of transaction and use tax as a percentage of the Bradley Burns is very consistent in third quarter 24, first quarter 25, and second quarter 25. So there's some sort of a spike that happened likely throughout the state related to fourth quarter 24, but I don't know what that specifically is. I'm just speculating.
And also with the business and industry, what causes those sudden spikes and then sharp?
Those are, when it's business and industry, it's dependent on where that product is delivered when it comes to measure the transaction use tax measure. And so what we've seen is fulfillment centers primarily as the biggest, largest business type. We've seen some huge spikes upward. And then it's in one quarter, when you're having a big spike upward, a year later in the same quarter, you're going to have a spike downward. So it's likely when it's business and industry, it's typically related. If you see big spikes, it's both on the Bradley Burns side and on the transaction and use tax. It's likely more related to the largest business type, fulfillment centers. And we've seen quarters where Amazon and others have grown so significantly. It's very specific to individual agencies throughout the state, and it's typically in those counties that have the available space and the land. Ventura County is one of those. And so we've had big spikes upward, and cities that are sharing in the pool dollars in that quarter, this is on the Bradley Burns side, those agencies that have the fulfillment centers, their cash is going way up. And so their share of the pool, because the county pool is allocated based on each agency's share of the county's share. And if one agency's cash is going way up, that agency's share of the pool is going up, and the other agencies in the pool in that county are going down. So when it applies to transaction and use tax, it's based on delivery. And if you're seeing spikes from fulfillment centers, you're going to see these same spikes happening in the county where that product is delivered. Autos and transportation, it typically is new motor vehicle dealers because that's the largest business type within autos and transportation. General consumer goods, the largest business type is discount department stores. So when you see big trends, it's more likely to be in those business types that make up the biggest percentage of that industry group.
Thank you. And when you look at the projections, your graph with the projections, say like what we know is happening now, what is it, Rite Aid that shut down? So that building is vacant. I don't know what if anything, if you know or have in discussions with the city, if there's a plan for that, if that falls in your projections, as well as the Sprouts that's going in that shopping center there.
Yeah, so those would be in terms of that, that's confidential in terms of talking about the individual businesses in the city, but in general, statewide, when we're doing those forecasts, and Rite Aids are all going out.
Right.
So yes, we're working with city staff throughout the state, and the best thing that we get is the intel from staff when we do our quarterly meetings. And so if they know of another business that's going in to that helps us with the forecast. So we know instead of zeroing that out on a go-forward basis, we're going to fill it in with estimated dollars depending on which business is going into that site. So yes, definitely we work with city staff on that. And I mean, if we're not getting that intel from city staff, we're just then we're looking at statewide trends like Rite Aid's closing. We've had other individual department stores that have closed throughout the state. If you have quick service restaurants that are closing, we will factor that into the individual agency forecast if they have those businesses in their city.
Got it. Good, thank you. Any other comments and discussion? Are there any public comments regarding this item?
There are none.
Thank you. Presentation is a receive and file. There is no vote necessary at this time. Thank you very much, Mr. Plumley. We appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for all
Thank you
your
for
feedback.
coming. Thank you for the
Excellent question.
information.
Oh, one more thing. Is it,
Yes.
can we get an electronic copy of this sent to the
Yes.
members of your presentation?
Yes, the city staff has it.
Okay, awesome. All right. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
Thank you. You
you.
as well.
Thank you.
Does staff have any comments?
Yes, I was able to quickly pull up our budget and answer to the last question about the sales tax percentage. Doing some quick math, sales tax is about 23% of our general fund revenue, and if we just take Measure U out of that, it would be about 11%. But sales tax is our highest revenue source, so that's why this committee is so important, and we thank you for your time.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Does the committee have any comments? All right. The next regular quarterly meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, January 28th, 2026, I should say.
Oh, yes.
It's 25, at 4 p.m. The meeting is now adjourned. The time is 5:45.